Hannah by Gregory Marlowe. Read by Steve Ogden. Stories of the Robot Wars. Every robot on the planet did the same thing on April 10th, 2035. No exceptions. They all froze in the middle of whatever they were doing at exactly 2:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and shut down. No exceptions. They were down for exactly 32 seconds before they rebooted, and then they attacked the human race. Every helper bot, every companion, every worker bot, every single robot on the entire planet became a violent weapon targeting the nearest human being. They all did the same thing. No exception. But the human side of the Great Robot War is full of exceptional stories. Every human story of that day is different. This is one of those stories. Hannah. The first scream from the robot attacks was the most terrible sound Hannah had ever heard, or would ever hear again for the rest of her life. It wasn't the quaver of fear in the sound, or even the way it halted abruptly with a thump. The thing that made Hannah's blood freeze in her veins was the fear that the scream came from her daughter. Hannah dropped the box of cake mix on the aisle floor, and Peyton squirmed in his seat. He was only 2, but even he could tell something wasn't right. Hannah grabbed the shopping cart and headed for the end of the aisle. She had to find her daughter and make sure that horrible sound hadn't come from her. Bethany was 10, but Hannah was still having a hard time breaking her own stranger danger mindset. She knew that Bethany deserved a little more freedom and responsibility. Hannah was taking baby steps by sending her to find canned mushrooms. It gave Hannah a chance to pick out a cake for Bethany's birthday the following week. Now she wished she had never let the girl leave her side. Peyton started whining as they rushed to the end of the aisle. She petted him on his arm to calm him. An older woman holding a pack of chicken was looking in the direction of the scream when the shouting started. This time it was definitely a man, and not a 10-year-old girl, but he sounded just as frightened as the first voice. His shout stopped suddenly as well, and Hannah's panic shifted into high gear. She had to find her daughter. "Which way?" she whispered, her hands starting to shake. Where the hell was the canned goods aisle? She was at this store 3 times a week, and now she couldn't remember anything. She forced herself to focus. They had passed that aisle earlier, that's why she had sent Bethany back. She passed 3 more aisles, each with bewildered customers looking upward as if an explanation might come from the intercom system in the ceiling. She wanted to shout her daughter's name, but something told her that was not a good idea. Finally, she got to the canned vegetables aisle and saw Bethany. She looked on the verge of tears, clutching a small can of mushrooms in her hand. Hannah had just enough time to let relief wash over her before the machine stepped into the opposite end of the aisle. It was one of the helper bots that worked in the store. She could tell that by the insignia printed on its chest like a name badge. The machine was a dull gray metal with plastic trim for a sleek design. It had a thin torso and featureless white plastic face. A pair of cold, expressionless eyes looked down the aisle at Hannah, and then to Bethany. The bot looked incorrect, like something inside of it was broken. It crouched low to the ground. Robots were always so proper, standing rigid and calm, like a butler. She thought of the cleaning bot that came twice a month to their apartment. This one looked like an animal, ready to attack, and to Hannah's horror, that is exactly what it did. It bounded down the aisle on all 4s, right toward Bethany. Hannah pushed the buggy with Peyton to one side and dashed down the aisle herself. She would not put both of her children in danger. Bethany was closer to Hannah's side of the aisle. She would put herself between her children and the machine as soon as possible. Her eyes darted for a weapon, and she grabbed the closest, largest can of carrots she could find. The robot was halfway to Bethany. She could hear a whine in her daughter's throat, building to a scream. Hannah had not thrown a softball in over 10 years, and the protest from her shoulder confirmed it as she flung the can up over her head and hurled it at the robot. The can connected with its head, making a satisfying crunch. The machine's forward momentum stopped as it rocked back on its heels and fell to its back. Hannah passed her daughter and grabbed a large can of mushrooms, the ones she'd really wanted Bethany to get in the first place. She raised the can above her head and leaped on the prone machine, bringing the can down on the robot's cracked plastic face and shattering one of its eye sockets. She started to raise the can for a second blow, but a metal hand wrapped around her wrist and the can fell to the floor. She had one knee on each side of the robot's chest and could feel it squirm beneath her, trying to throw her off. She brought the back of her fist down on its face, caving in the remaining eye and breaking her pinky finger in the process. She felt sharp metal fingers dig into the calf of her leg, shredding muscle and tendon, and she let out a scream. "Mom!" Bethany screamed from behind her. She looked up for a split second and felt a mechanical knee slam into her kidney. She knew she'd be peeing blood for a week if she lived through this. But that didn't matter now. If the robot got to its feet, her children would be its next target. She had to end this. She reached for the shelf on her right and grabbed the only thing she could find, a large can of potatoes. She brought it down on the robot's head, wondering for the first time if that was actually the location of a robot's brain. But the slack in its grip told her she was doing something right. She pulled her other arm free and brought the can down with both hands. The machine's left arm fell limp, but the other continued to clench onto her calf. Fire shot up her leg and into her hip. The robot squirmed beneath her, and she could see a circuit board peeking through the broken white faceplate. With all her remaining strength, she brought the can down one more time at that exact spot. The machine stopped moving, its limbs collapsing to the ground. Hannah managed to pry the dead hand from her mangled calf and crawled back to where her daughter was huddled in a pile of cans that had spilled from the shelf. She wanted to hold her forever, but Peyton's wails were loud and fearful at the end of the aisle. Hannah knew that walking that far was out of the question. She clenched Bethany's hand. "Get your brother, sweetie," she said. Her daughter looked terrified at the thought of stepping away from her mother again. "You can do it. Just come right back. I'll watch you." 20 minutes later, Hannah held Peyton to her chest and Bethany close to her side. They sat with the remaining customers huddled in the front of the store like the government warning had told them to do. They all watched out the window as the world changed forever. But Hannah's world was still safe, and she clung to them tighter than ever. The end. Robots are forbidden, but Jerry is not a robot. Robots were outlawed before Joel was even born, but he's been obsessed with them his entire life. That was before he saw Jerry, the giant metal man, in Levi's barn. So if Jerry is not a robot, what is he? Jerry is Not a Robot by Gregory Marlowe. For more information, visit www.gregmarlowe.com. Hannah by Gregory Marlowe. Read by Steve Ogden. Copyright 2016 Gregory Marlowe. All rights reserved. Music from pond5.com.